So good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here today, and welcome Nicole, welcome Rod. Let's start with some introductions. I'll start and then hand it over to Nicole. My name is Ashish Parikh, and I lead the segment solutions and platforms within the IoT practice at Arrow. And I use the word practice because it's not a business unit. What we're here to do is really unify all the capabilities, all the products, all the services, all the solutions that we have across Arrow. And when I talk about that, it's across all the partner ecosystems that we have as well. And so as we do that, it's really about how do we help customers build solutions, how do we roll up solutions and help take those to market, and really that's our mission here. So what we're going to do today is really explore the world of IoT and how Microsoft and Intel are working with us and with the rest of you to really deliver some of these outcomes that businesses are looking for. With that, Nicole.
Thank you, Ashish. So I'm Nicole Daniil. I manage the channel program for IoT at Microsoft globally. What that means is we've got a handful of partners like Arrow that we work with in taking IoT solutions and scaling them across the globe and making them repeatable. So we've been working with Arrow for quite some time on how do we enable the repeatability and the scalability of these solutions that have been for a long time sort of custom or one-off. I've been with Microsoft for about 15 years. I think I was the first cloud seller on the planet when we launched Azure about 10 years ago. And before that, I came from Rockwell Automation, which is industrial automation. And I remember our challenge being at that point, how do you kind of connect the plant floor with the boardroom? And that was, I'm going to date myself here, but that was right around the time that Microsoft had launched NT, which made it possible to actually have a client-server technology based on the technologies that Rod and I both now are involved in today. You know, an Intel-based processor on a computer that could run plants across the globe in a distributed sort of way, kind of almost making SCADA systems a competitive arena, right? So that was our challenge back then, just being able to have that client-server architecture out there. And now I look at today, we're still facing some of the same challenges in terms of, hey, we've got now that technology behind it, but then how do we really look at IoT enabling aggregation of all of this massive amount of data coming from the plant floor, being able to analyze it and put it into decision-making scenarios. And so I think it's been an evolution over the last, I would say, 25 years that I've been working on the technology side of getting data from the very lowest level of the very edge all the way up into the cloud and back down to the decision maker. So that in a nutshell is, I think, our challenge with IoT and kind of where we're going. So I'm excited to be here today, and I'll turn it over to Rod.
Rod.
Thanks. So I'm Rod O'Shea. I work for Intel. I run our global IoT partner programs. For those of you that can't tell from my accent, I'm not naturally American. I actually come from the UK. My surname's O'Shea, so I actually, in Ireland, they'd call me a plastic paddy because I have an Irish surname coming from the UK. And recently, about just over a year ago, I transitioned from living in London, or as I say in America, London, England, to Phoenix, Arizona. So I think I'm role modeling cultural change from that move. And very different environments, but our core IoT practice for Intel is based in Phoenix, Arizona. And just one experience I had while I was early on my kind of time here was I'm normally quite good at answering questions because I get lots of them. We have lots of panels. I was in a kind of a latte bar, and I ordered a latte in my kind of English accent, and the server said, "Geez, I love your accent. Were you born with that?" And I didn't know how to answer that question, so I just nodded and smiled. But one of those questions you think there was probably a good answer I could have given there, but I didn't. For those of you that have kind of been following technology use this year, this is Intel's 50th anniversary. We've been having kind of huge celebrations globally. You know, the original founders of the company included Gordon Moore, who postulated Moore's law, and that continues to be a turbine that drives lots of innovation in our core business of silicon. So, you know, Intel's a almost $70 billion company this year. We spent $13 billion on R&D last year. And, you know, it's all about technology innovation. But, you know, one thing that we're absolutely clear on is we can't do it alone. And actually, you know, Nicole, Atish and I were talking before we came up on stage. And you think about, you know, go back 30 years to the kind of big turbine of the PC, personal computing, you know, era. It was all about working together with partners to deliver outcomes. So I think we figured out we can't do it alone. And if ever there was a time where there's massive transformation in the Internet of Things and the need for us to be working effectively together as an industry and as an ecosystem, it's now. But we need to be working together. And I think, you know, the essence of the panel today will be exploring that and figuring out where there are real opportunities in the world of IoT.
Thanks, Rod. And you know, one of the things that we saw, so Intel's been in business for 50 years, but you know, one of the slides that Matt put up basically seemed to show Intel, you know, the graph for Intel from Google Trends was, you know, down and to the right. Clearly, that's not what we see. Can you kind of expand a little bit upon what Intel has been doing and a little bit more about the growth and the capabilities that you guys are now delivering into the market?
Yeah, so I was quite surprised by, I understand the essence of the comments Matt was making yesterday around the movement away from searching for technologies to searching for use cases and solutions. So I understand that, and that makes sense. It always makes me nervous when I see charts with Intel with a blue line going from top left to bottom right, particularly as we've come out of a period of 6 record quarters. So I think there was some kind of commentary on that. You know, the transformation that Intel is kind of working through is we've always been a company that delivered technologies that create experiences. And you know, Matt talked a lot about the more you can deliver solutions that enable experiences, then the better the outcomes, and completely agree with that. I think the other thing is, you know, we talked about, you know, Intel's history. You know, if you know, our parents' Intel was predicated very much on the personal computer. If you look at Intel's business now, there's still a significant personal computer business, but our data-centric businesses are about the same kind of size. So we have significant focus on growth in supporting the innovation of the cloud service providers, you know, including great companies like Microsoft. So you know, we're seeing that journey move towards the delivery of supporting deployments of those complete solutions. And you know, the great thing with companies like Intel and Microsoft, and you could name many others, is any kind of technology deployment anywhere globally, we're probably involved in that in some shape or form. So we're probably delivering some part of that capability. I think the challenge now is how do we make sure that we maximize the value of those technologies in an era where there's new business models, new capabilities, lots of market hype, but also lots of market confusion. But you know, but that movement towards a more data-centric capability is a key North Star for us.
Yeah, and it's not just the data center; it's also about the edge, and we'll come to that in a little bit. But Nicole, you know, Microsoft has the last 4 years have been completely different from Microsoft. I think the audience could probably benefit from just a little bit of, you know, that transformation that you're seeing inside the company and how it's impacting, you know, your go-to-market.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, we've been partners with Intel for a long time, and I think if we were to see a similar graph at a similar time frame, we would see that our market in general, not market share, but market for PCs has declined over the years, just the traditional PC, and we've had to together invent brand new categories of PCs. I think, you know, some of those were things like the convertibles and the detachables and that kind of thing. But at the core, what's really happening is that there's a lot more intelligence embedded in the devices in small form factors. Therefore, a lot of the compute power that you needed to have on a PC has been replaced by things like cell phones and devices that you might use in your home that are smaller form factors that already have the processing capability built into that edge. And I think that's really been, from a technology standpoint, the biggest journey that Microsoft has taken over the last couple of years is to not look at the world in terms of PCs, but to look at the world of intelligent edge that communicates with the intelligent cloud, and then everything that happens in between, and the analytics and the data and the insights that you can get. On the business side, we went through a massive journey ourselves. When we first launched our cloud platform, that was something that kind of cut into our core as a business. We had launched a server platform back in the day that I was mentioning, and when the Windows NT days when I was not with Microsoft. And that, when we started looking at the ability to commoditize really compute power and storage in the cloud, we had a massive, internal discussion, let's put it that way, about, how is this going to disrupt our cash cow, which, servers and Windows were the cash cow for Microsoft for many years. And that led to many conversations about, hey, this is how the world is going. We've got to be the platform provider in a hybrid scenario. We need to be that platform provider in a public cloud scenario. We need to embrace the decision of the customer, whether they want to do, on-premises all the way up to public cloud and everything in between. But that led then to other philosophical things like, hey, how do we pay our people? How do we pay our people that are selling physical servers today to transition into selling, 10 cents per minute in the cloud, right? It was a huge mind shift for us, and it took us, I would say, a good 8 years to get those things right. And now we're seeing that as our customers transition to things like outcome as a service or SaaS or PaaS or device as a service, they're going through similar questions. How do we start to move somebody that sold devices, in the case maybe of even Arrow, and then the resellers and the partners of Arrow, devices through the ecosystem? How do we start to look at how do we compensate people on selling an outcome that might be, 10 cents per monitoring per month?
It's hard to figure out how to pay people, when you've got a long tail there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a technology journey for us, and it's also been a business journey for us.
And if I can say, you kind of went from being very Windows-centric to being very open, right? It's, I heart Linux kind of a thing.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Heart is a big word. Okay.
All right. I small heart, a big heart Windows, correct? But I still, again, better together. But it's a very open ecosystem, and I think that's one of the great benefits that you guys are bringing to really this community here. So let's kind of go from where we started with the companies to really the IoT strategies that you guys have had and been developing, right? It's not baked yet. I think all of us are learning in this ecosystem that IoT is a journey. It's not a destination right now, and it's ultimately going to be how we do business. But maybe, Rod, if you want to start with Intel and your IoT journey, and what are some of the lessons you've learned so far from it?
Yeah, so the thing about Internet of Things, it's a very broad term, and it means many different things to many different people. And I'll give you kind of one observation. The Internet, that's kind of quite a broad term. And if you think about the most vague term possible, it's thing. So if you start there, it's a very, very broad term. So many of us kind of have our roots in the embedded industry. I've been working in the embedded business for the last couple of decades, mainly in Europe. And as we started looking at the Internet of Things, we started saying, is there an opportunity to have a capability to really start to drive deployments in a way that is repeatable and really drives value? And those of you that have worked in the embedded or in the early stages of the IoT industry, it's littered with science projects, first ideas. The number of times I've sat in boardrooms and people have said, Rod, the industry keeps talking about $1 trillion. Actually, I think it's $1.3 trillion we talked about yesterday. I just don't see it. So we've been working through that journey, and for the last 3 years in Intel, a group of us have been maniacally focused on the problem statement, which is, can you build a partner ecosystem to accelerate the repeat deployment of solutions? And when we started on that journey, we had to define what's a solution. Within Intel, I found 6 different definitions of what an IoT solution was. So we had to tidy up our own shop internally first. And by the way, that's not a 24-hour discussion. And then we started saying, how do we really prove this premise that there are meaningful, repeat deployable capabilities, and how do we enable our partners to succeed in that environment? We can talk a lot more about the details, and we have some follow-on breakouts where we go into some of the solution stacks. But just kind of a couple of data points that you might find interesting. In 2017, as we were testing this premise, we said globally, if we can find 2 or 3 IoT end-to-end solutions that we can repeat deploy 2 or 3 times, that's probably going to be a success. And doing the maths, 2 or 3 times 2 or 3, the top end there of our expectation was about 10 deployments globally in a business last year of $62 billion. It was a relatively small target. I challenged a team this year. Well, could we get, can we 10x that? Can we start really figuring out how we take solutions and repeat deploy them? And we now have over 100 of these repeat deployable solutions that we've brought into our ecosystem. And again, we can talk more about that. And we have, well, when I prepared my notes yesterday flying down from Phoenix, we had 243 deployments. We now have 273 deployments of these solutions called market-ready solutions. So actually, we achieved 30 yesterday. There's an engine growing, and there's an opportunity for everyone in this room to engage in that solution journey. And a key thing is, Intel doesn't own these solutions. The partners own these solutions. We're just helping to inventorize, create, and market those capabilities. But you can repeat deploy solutions, and you can very rapidly move away from the science project. And the science project has littered our industry for the last 10 years. And most of those science projects, even though they're not called science projects, they are science projects. They don't go to scale, and basically nobody gets commercial value from it, particularly our end users. So that's kind of the essence of the journey that we've been.
Yeah, I think other people call them proof of concepts, and I think that's like a banned word at Microsoft.
Yeah.
There's many terms for that. But
Yeah.
Proof of concept's another good one.
And you touched on repeatability. Nicole, you want to kind of talk about a little bit, repeatable solutions and really what Microsoft's driving there.
Well, Rod just stole my talk track, so.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
I agree
But
with that.
actually, if you do look at our strategies around repeatability, they're very similar, which I think talks to the fact that we recognize the opportunity there. And as you were saying, Rod, we see a lot of science projects, a lot of proof of concepts out there. And I always ask, okay, great that we have a repeatable solution. How many times has it been repeated? That's the real interesting part for all of us in this room. Because, when you build a lot of one-off, it's very costly. It takes a lot of human resources, actual bodies implementing solutions, which there's always going to be a place for that, right? For every single application that you deploy in a different factory or a different retail outlet or a different smart grid or smart energy solution, you're still going to have that last mile. But the idea is, let's put the building blocks in place so that 80% of it is going to be repeatable every time, and then there's the last mile implementation or last mile integration. And I think Arrow has a really good example of how they took something that was custom and made it repeatable and repeated, which I think most of the people in this room have seen the SAM car and understand what the SAM car is about. Is that a fair statement? Yes? No? So Arrow built the semi-automated car for a person named Sam Schmidt, who was a race car driver, ended up in an accident and became paralyzed. And so they built a technology that with a cap, the sensors in the cap could read his movements and be able to control the car so that he could race again. He was an Indy racer. With that same technology, there's all kinds of information that also comes off of the car. So you've got the telemetry data in the car, things like, heat, gas, speed, et cetera, and then you've got that combined with the actual driver, what's happening to him at that moment in terms of his movements. Did he move too fast, right, left, forward, or back to accelerate? And then in addition to that, what were the circumstances that might have caused a deviation? And then, of course, that combined with GPS, is he deviating too far so that we make sure that he gets back on track? All of that technology was built for that car, but then Arrow recognized, hey, this is technology that we can repeat in a solution that might be useful for the average driver that might end up in a car crash. What if we could provide all of that telemetry and the biometrics back to the first responder, so the first responder knows, hey, the person was going too fast, or maybe it was going too slow, moved too quickly, heart rate was elevated, maybe they passed out. How do we respond to that person to make sure that the response is fast and the best response that you could have? In addition, they looked at, how do we use HoloLens so that the first responder can be able to talk to a specialist. Maybe somebody's lungs got punctured in the crash and they want to talk to a specialist back at the hospital that can guide them through what to do, right? So the HoloLens then allows the first responder to be hands-free. So in a nutshell, the idea is, hey, we took this custom or bespoke solution and converted it into something that can be used in situations across the globe in a first responder type of environment.
And one of the things that Arrow did there was we open sourced the technology, right? Everything that we built for the SAM car was open source, so anybody can use that. And the idea was, hey, if somebody can benefit from this, great. But that kind of goes back to what you were talking about is, you didn't mention it, but Microsoft, as part of the repeatability, is really kind of creating a lot of open source that partners can go use to start building out those solutions.
That's right.
So if you want to just expand on that program that you guys have.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of things to try to speed up solutions. It's all in the context of how do we speed it and get it repeated. But we've got an open source repository that is built by, some of it's built by Microsoft and some of it's built by our third-party partners that are building repeatable sets of code or solutions that you can visit and go look at them. Things like smart energy, smart grid, smart retail, smart factory, et cetera, smart buildings, which is one of the areas that Arrow is highly involved in as well. And so we've made those open source in order for those building blocks to be there, ready for the partners like you to pick them up and do sort of that last mile 80% and upward integration and provide really the IP that's unique to you as a partner. The other area that I was going to mention there around the open source is that you might have seen an announcement that we made recently about a $5 billion investment in IoT. We've got about 1.5 under our belts today, and that 1.5 has primarily been in an investment called Azure Sphere, which is, how many in the room have heard of MCUs? Probably many people. So think of CPUs applicable to high power computing in our traditional computers and servers and that type of thing, and then MCUs are the chips that we all have in our homes. So on an average, probably all of us have anywhere from 15 to 25 MCUs in our homes, things that control our alarm clocks or the display on the microwave, our refrigerators, et cetera. All of those commodity, or I should say home good devices have MCUs in them. And we launched a product called Azure Sphere just recently. You'll see it in the news. That's a highly secure chip. And one of the reasons that we did this, we open sourced it, so you will have seen that we have partnered with Linux on this, because we wanted it to be highly customizable yet secure at the same time. So one of the reasons that we did that was we said, hey, in order for IoT to really be ubiquitous and to get the massive scale, we have to make sure that if your daughter has a Barbie, we've all heard of that, right? The Barbie that can talk to you, right? Is it going to say to you, hey, your hair looks terrible today, you look ugly? Or is the Barbie going to say to you, hey, let's go out and play today, right? And somebody could potentially go in and hack that toy or hack your stove, turn on the gas at 4 o'clock in the morning, turn it back on, and then boom, when you wake up, ignite your home, right? That could be, those are the types of hacking scenarios that could happen with the consumer devices becoming ubiquitous in the home. And so the whole idea behind Azure Sphere was let's build the technology because we have the capability to do that with our learnings from Xbox and other products that have been hacked in the past. But let's put it out there so that anybody can adopt it and chip manufacturers can use it, and it'll become sort of the standard around making sure that devices are highly secure and then connected to a highly secure cloud.
So just to build on that kind of that discussion around innovation and then the journey from that innovation to deployments. Now, I think every IoT architecture has kind of a similar underlying capability. So there's innovation at the edge. You were talking about sensors and MCUs. There's some kind of edge capability. People talk about gateways where you kind of manage those, and actually that's where I think there's a difference between data center and data centric. I think that's where the data centric journey starts, managing at the edge. Then you have some kind of network capability, and then the link to some kind of cloud service provision. A great example, is Azure. So one of the discussions for the industry is, can you take that capability and repeat deploy that end-to-end goodness with all that innovation? So we started with this premise of, let's inspect what's deployed. Let's really, really understand what's been deployed. Let's make sure that there's real market value in that deployment. So customers, it's commercially available, customers are seeing benefit from it, they're getting a return on investment. And we work through basically a methodology for inspecting those deployed solutions and saying, this is the type of solution that is likely to scale. And very basic things: is it available? Is it supportable? Is there a committed channel? Is the value proposition compelling? If that partner says, I can make this available in Germany, do they really mean that, or do they mean that they've once been on an aeroplane to Germany? So we go through that kind of rigorous assessment of partner capability, and we call that a market-ready solution, which is you can basically take the whole thing and deploy it, and it includes the path to market, including the channel. So that's a market-ready solution. And of those, I think the industry norm for POCs going to deployment is significantly less than 20%. I think if you talk to kind of, many of the industry executives, it's kind of low double digits. I think Intel's view is it's even lower than that. If you look at the fact we've very specifically said what's deployable and how to repeat it, and again, just to give you kind of our kind of current live data as of this morning, we have 45 market-ready solutions reporting globally. Of those, 19 have deployed 5 or more times this year. So, and 30 of those have deployed 3 or more times. So we're actually getting the return that we expect by being very, very methodical around the repeat deployment. But to build on kind of where Nicole was taking us in terms of repeatability, that whole end user deployment includes the path to market, therefore makes assumptions about the value-added reseller or the SI. So that's great, and I can have a buildings management solution, and I can include a specific building management SI. How many building management SIs are there in the US? I hear different numbers, but we stopped counting at 850. In Europe, there's thousands. In PRC, China, there's thousands. So actually, you want to have that SI capability to deliver the last mile, to deliver the outcome, to understand specifically the customer's requirements. But if you can link that to a hardened building management technology bundle that's kind of 80% ready or 90% ready, and you can feed that to that buildings SI, you're starting to really get through a lot of the issues that some of those buildings SIs don't really understand the enterprise. They don't understand how to integrate an Azure capability. So you can start to get after that kind of IT, OT goodness. So you're getting repeatability, but also the work that's being done to maybe integrate that sensor into the edge and the gateway, integrate that gateway into the network. That problem is being solved again and again and again globally. Thousands of people solving the same issue. And our premise is, let's solve it once as an industry, do it properly, and then let's add value to that capability and delivering those outcomes. And within that framework, so there's market-ready solutions, there's technology bundles beneath those. We call them RFP-ready kits. There's many industry terms that SIs can take, value-added resellers can take, and deliver those solutions to end users. That becomes a really compelling value proposition, and it increases the end user's confidence in the ability to deploy a solution. And also, it enables us to have a much faster time to money, time to revenue, time to value for us as an ecosystem, because we're deploying value earlier. Again, that was one of the premises of Matt yesterday, that we weren't deploying value quickly enough. So that idea of repeatability, understanding you're part of the value chain, not reinventing things that many others have invented. That's our parents' IoT. That's not today's IoT. And then deploying those solutions in a consistent way is really the premise. And 18 months into this journey with Intel, I'm absolutely confident that this is a winning capability. And then the fantastic accelerator we have now is Arrow, and we can talk more about that. But the ability to then link those compelling technology bundles with Arrow's scape and ability to aggregate those capabilities has been a key part of the jigsaw. So this actually is a premise we had a couple of years ago that's working, and I think the industry is really starting to adopt this capability because it's generating real value.
Nicole, you want to touch on the IoT Solution Aggregator Program?
Yes.
I think, again, we've seen a lot of evolution there, but I think it'd be good for people to understand what is it and why are you guys doing this?
Yeah, so I was glad that you touched on that, because we kind of look at these IoT solutions end to end and look at how many partners it actually takes in the ecosystem to make those come to light. And what we've found is that in any given solution, it usually takes anywhere from 10 to 40 partners, depending on how complex that IoT solution is, all the way from the ODM, the hardware vendor itself, the distribution partners, the SIs, ISVs, OEMs, all the way to the end customer, right? And there are a lot of different players that provide value in that ecosystem. And so we've built out a program that's called the Solution Aggregator Program, not very innovative, but it really describes what it is. And that's where we look at partners like Arrow that have the global scale and the capabilities all the way from hardware to software to cloud, et cetera, as being sort of the general contractor, if you will, or the Sherpa, which I think is the title of this session is, pick your Sherpa. We look at Arrow as being the general contractor, the Sherpa of those solutions end to end, not to do it all on their own, but to bring in the right partners that fit in to that specific solution or that specific vertical. And so, we're similar in mindset on that with Intel as well. It's let's put our, no pun intended, but our arrows into one quiver so that we can go all together in the same direction in terms of really working with the right partners to be able to aggregate those solutions and get them to market faster and in a repeated sort of way.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to like double click into maybe one of the market ready solutions. The one that I think is quite interesting is something like a V5 systems, right? You guys had the vision of, hey, this is something interesting, and we're seeing a problem around this. Rod, for many of the folks in this room that may not know about V5, I just think that's an interesting solution because all the things that are required to bring it together to ultimately deliver the outcome, and there's a lot of complexity there, but that's probably one of the solutions where we're seeing the most amount of repeatability at the same time.
Yeah, so it's a great example. Before I answer that, I love the arrows putting our arrows together in one quiver. I think we should send that to Matt Anderson. It's the best piece of marketing I've heard so far.
Yeah.
So we're working on this premise that you can get repeatable, deployable capabilities. The great thing with I think the technology ecosystem is we have the opportunity to talk to each other at different levels of integration. So Intel has a great relationship with Microsoft, Intel has a great relationship with Dell and with Cisco, and you can figure out how those ecosystems can come together. So we found a relatively small SI ISV company called V5 that they offer the capability to deliver. I mean, basically, the real value is they deliver solutions that don't rely on access to the grid. They're solar powered, but they deliver visualization, visual monitoring capabilities, and they deliver the opportunity to then to link that into a network, into a corporate enterprise. So they deliver this kind of bundle of technology deployment and visualization security capability in areas where there are extreme conditions or non-normal conditions. So for example, you want to add a DSS capability in your car park if you're a company, or you want to add that to a very specific part of an oil pipeline. They offer that kind of capability. So relatively small company, doing something difficult very well, amplified through a relationship with Dell, amplified through a relationship with Arrow. So Arrow have onboarded V5 onto their line card. Arrow are providing the capability to aggregate and deploy those solutions. And now a number of very kind of large IT SIs are starting to go and scale those capabilities. And obviously it's creating data that is fantastic for Azure and customers driving capabilities back into the cloud. Now, but the thing to think about here is, we made a mistake. Actually, we've got Troy Smith here in the room. Troy and I kind of beat ourselves up a couple of years ago, and something that we didn't quite figure out is we said, okay, well, this is a security solution. This is digital surveillance and security. So we're going to feed that into our smart cities practice. Okay, and that felt a reasonably smart thing to do. Then you start saying, well, the use case behind this is visual monitoring. So, visual monitoring, looking at a sequence of events and deciding on an outcome, clearly that's an absolutely critical application for a smart city, looking at any kind of threats that you may have in a city. But guess what? Exactly the same IP can apply in smart manufacturing. If you're building a manufacturing line and you want to visually inspect parts, visual monitoring is a perfect capability. So you don't have people looking at the same thing 1,000 times a day. You do that with a basic visual monitoring. So actually, the core technology, that visual monitoring technology, you're using to detect security issues in cities. You're also using it to run more effective manufacturing pipelines, autonomous driving, and. So the premise is Internet of Things is very, very vague. You get these use cases, and I would argue that there are probably less than 20 use cases that really define all of IoT. If we had a bunch of, and Microsoft may have a slightly different view on that, I don't know, but if you look at visual displays, visual monitoring, energy monitoring, environmental monitoring, smart buildings, I could go down the list, predictive maintenance, which is where most of us start in our IoT journey. Those use cases can be redeployed again and again and again across multiple different industries. And actually, I believe visual and video is an absolutely compelling capability that goes across all of those industries. And if you're a technology provider here that doesn't have a strategy for how you're going to manage and deal with video, you need to be thinking about that very quickly. And also, that feeds into a whole workload consolidation discussion, how you consolidate those workloads. Again, it applies to every use case. So you can start to build up these use cases that can be deployed across multiple industries. And that's what we should be doing as an ecosystem, is getting our offerings organized in a way that we can deliver ultimately rapid acceleration to end customers. So we started with V5, and I think we've got Willie Chow and Ted Damaris following this session in one of the breakouts, giving a kind of more detailed view of a number of those use cases. But that capability is repeat deployable again and again and again across many industries. And that's just tremendously compelling and tremendously exciting for an industry where we've been working on science projects for 2 decades.
Yeah, and if I can add a couple things to that, again, you have the power, you got the compute, you got the visual inspection, and all different types of sensors you can attach to that compute node. It has to go communicate that to something, and you need a network for that. And again, part of the aggregation that Aero can do is provide that cellular service, because the whole idea here is you don't want to dig a trench, so you want to add the cellular service. That data needs to go somewhere, and ultimately somebody needs to go install it, right? None of our companies are going to go on cherry pickers and install something on a pole. And that's where some of the partners in this room are going to play a pretty big part, right? They have the expertise and the capability to go do this around the country here in the US. I want to kind of pivot to something Rod talked about, manufacturing and visual inspection, and we touched on edge computing, but I think that's an important trend that's happening in IoT. And both of you guys, I think, see the market similarly and kind of approaching it from your perspectives. Nicole, from a Microsoft perspective, there's a lot of innovation going on in this space relative to, again, we talk about machine learning and we talk about the intelligent edge. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll start with the edge and then kind of move up the food chain. So the edge, we kind of look at that as in a couple different ways. There's brownfield edge, so sensors and devices that collect data have been around for a long time, right? And maybe that's simply, hey, how do we gather that data and somehow aggregate it up in the cloud and process it in a different way? But then we're seeing this whole emergence of smart edge devices that actually do the processing right in the device themselves, and then only send interesting data up to the cloud to be analyzed. And I'll give a really simple example in the healthcare industry. We've got a partner who built a device that you put on your finger and it'll take a blood sample, analyze it real time, and if you're fine, and maybe you're diabetic or pregnant or whatever, it analyzes the information real time and says, hey, you're okay, don't worry, you don't have to call the doctor. Or it might send that data, that information to the cloud to be analyzed by algorithms running in an intelligent cloud, and then off to the clinician that's going to validate that data and get in touch with the doctor, reducing a cycle that in some places might have taken 2 to 3 weeks to a cycle that can be done in a matter of 10 minutes, all through processing from edge to cloud. So that's kind of an example of how devices themselves are going from just measuring and then processing in the cloud to actually being able to process on the actual device. So that edge is, kind of where the whole IoT experience starts. And then if you think about, what are the building blocks as you move up to the cloud? Recently, we announced IoT Central, which is a SaaS-based service to take all of these different devices that are either doing sort of brownfield or greenfield intelligent edge processing and put them into a much easier format to connect that up to the cloud. So IoT Central is really the way to make that whole cycle of building out those custom applications a lot faster by using the building blocks that are in place.
And I think that's, again, part of the evolution that we're seeing, right? Again, you have, if somebody wants to go build a custom solution and wants to use all the platform services, you guys have all of them. You can go build it. But most people in this room aren't looking to build platforms over and over again. I think they want to go develop the application, which is really where Central comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the value of the edge and the rise of the edge is a critical theme that we all need to digest. So, apologies if you've heard this saying before. I think we talked about it in a previous Arrow session. My favorite IoT kind of semi-joke is God created the world in 7 days. And the reason it only took God 7 days to create the world is there was no legacy infrastructure. So there's tons of things out there. And, guess what? If we sat down today with a whiteboard and said, we're going to change this hotel and we're going to add all this extra value and we'll do kind of video panels in the lifts. So actually, they've got some pretty basic ones here anyway. We're going to do light management. There's an existing infrastructure. So you have to integrate all those things together in some kind of way. And there's one premise, which is everything goes directly into a centralized cloud. And I think we've all figured out pretty quickly we don't want that. First of all, go back to previous discussion, tons of data, the growth of video. You don't want to be sending that amount of data around your networks the whole time. There may be a subset of that you want to manage, which gives you value and reduces your security. There's latency issues. The example that's always cited is autonomous driving. If you're going to make an autonomous driving decision, you have to make that at the edge. You have to make that in the vehicle. You can't be going back to a centralized capability with any latency to make that decision. There's the whole on-prem, off-prem. I mean, if you want to have a discussion around the legislation around the German health industry and how you manage data, we could have a very nourishing 2 hours together, but there's a ton of complexity here. So we see the rise of the edge. Now, the thing is, people think about gateways and the edge, and they think, okay, well, this is kind of like a bridge or a router. Some of these can be quite chunky, capable, intelligent systems, and they can provide all kinds of workload consolidation opportunities at the edge. Again, we talked about V5. People put digital surveillance and security solutions in cities for security, and then they say, oh, you know what? We could do some audio detection. We could do some visual information. We could provide Wi-Fi in that environment. We could provide some citizen information. So you're starting to see the ability to consolidate those workloads at the edge. And again, workload consolidation, the industry confuses itself and people think, well, that means big virtual machines, that means a centralized cloud. One of the things Matt said yesterday, which was very intelligent, I thought, which was good, is, the cloud comes all the way down to the ground. So that's the growth of the edge. And workload consolidation becomes a key theme as you start to add those capabilities to the edge. And if you want to see the best example of workload consolidation, if you want to explain it to your family and friends, look at your phone. So, the phone is a great example of consolidating a bunch of workloads. My 18-year-old son, Joe, kind of said to me the other day, Rod, you're a Luddite, you still use your phone for voice calls. Because he didn't understand, he doesn't have a phone for voice calls. He has it for gaming and video and texting and maps. And so workload consolidation becomes a key part of that. So, I think every architecture has things integrating into some kind of edge capability. In Intel, we've termed it the rise of the edge, into some kind of network capability. And then there's some kind of more kind of centralized cloud offering. And I think, Nicole's talked about some of the strategies kind of around that. But I think getting that architecture right and understanding how you and your solution capability can play in that architectural framework is very important. And again, I think there'll be some great examples today where you can see that those edge capabilities in action and how they integrate into a cloud capability.
And I think on that edge piece, again, you talked about visual inspection on a factory line. You have to train a machine learning model in the cloud. There's a lot of compute required for that. And once that's trained, you can go deploy it on the edge so it's making those real-time decisions, because you don't need to again, send all that data to the cloud. you need to make the real-time decision of stop the line or alert somebody. And these are the kinds of solutions that, again, the combination of the technologies that Microsoft and Intel are bringing that are, bringing these use cases to life. We got about 10 minutes left. The hour's gone by quickly. I'll ask one last question to the panel, but then we'll open it up for a couple of questions to the audience here. From an industry segment perspective, are there particular industry segments that you're seeing more traction in, Nicole?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot around smart energy. We're seeing a lot around smart buildings, smart manufacturing. Those are probably three of the largest, but we're also seeing some interesting things happen around smart agriculture, smart education scenarios. It's pretty vast, but I think that we're kind of converging on around 6 or 7 that are the big ones that I mentioned.
Rod, what about from your?
Yes, I think the end user segments, there are many. And I think if you look at every geography, there's significant challenges around transportation, around manufacturing, around retail, around health. So I think those core industries are going to stay key. I think a critical learning for us is think about the use case and then how you would deploy it in the industry. So we used to think about retail inventory management. Now we think about inventory management, and guess what? Arrow's not really a retailer, but you kind of have inventory management issues, right?
Got a few parts.
And inventory management opportunities, I would add.
Yep.
So think about the use case, and the use case is around kind of visual monitoring, energy monitoring, smart buildings, as you were saying, is a really, really key, and then you can apply them in those market segments. And I think that gives us an opportunity to start the conversation at a really advanced stage, as opposed to sitting down with a retailer saying, I want an IoT project, I want a smart project. Rod, I'm worried about OT, IT integration. Can we have a 2-day seminar on that? And you're having a kind of a religious debate rather than talking about deployments.
Yeah, and I think part of this discussion is really don't walk in to a customer with a blank sheet of paper saying, I can build anything for you, but really start with some of these building blocks that we have, and then direct them to a conversation in terms of, again, based on their needs, what are the solutions that we can bring together that can accelerate, time to value for them.
I think that's, the points that you were just making are really good ones in terms of there are the verticals, right? But then there are these horizontal solutions that can be applicable across many, many industries, like asset management, cognitive services, for example. We see it a lot in retail, the ability to detect things like emotion. What am I feeling right now as I'm looking at this display, and then having dynamic displays served back to me so that maybe I can go from being disappointed in what's on the shelf to being guided to some place else that has what I'm looking for. So I think, things like that, they're applicable across so many industries. So also think about, what role can you play in plugging in to the verticals with these more horizontal type of solutions.
Great, thank you guys. We'll open it up for a couple questions. We've got the catch boxes there. Any questions?
Throw it to you.
Nice catch.
Thanks. So as you're looking to speed it and repeat it as you take these market-ready solutions and we're aggregating them and putting them all together, and our partners in the room take it to the next level and make them customer ready, how do you go in and have that discussion that takes the OT, IT divide, and how do we deal with that situation to help the adaptation at the end user?
So I think I'll start, but I'll kind of hand it off to you guys. I think what you're really talking about, we've been kind of focused on the technology. What you're kind of pointing at is what is the business transformation that needs to happen, the cultural transformation that needs to happen. And I think while we can provide some guidance, ultimately, you guys have the closest relationship in this room relative to your customers, and their problems, and really understanding their business. And in some cases you may have that capability. In others, there are other partners in the ecosystem that you can lean on that can provide that capability around business transformation, which I think is a critical part of IoT.
Yeah, I agree. I think the technology challenge is one that we've come a long way in solving, but the business transformation is where we see a lot of projects get stuck, and it's kind of what I was referring to earlier, which was around how do I go from, taking a complete solution that it's got components, it's got hardware, software, maybe some cloud services, and actual physical human services to go integrate this stuff. And how do I turn it in from, quoting all of those different pieces to my customer as different parts of the solution, and how do I go out and say, hey, I want to have, maybe an agriculture solution that these guys are working on right now, instead of quoting all the different pieces and parts, I want to just charge the farmer $10 per cow per month to be able to monitor the health of that cow to make sure that it's not being injected with hormones and all that kind of thing. And so that's really where we've seen the biggest hurdle to adoption, is to figure out how the business model changes along with technology. And we're looking to partners like Arrow to help us solve that in the industry.
Anything to add, Rod?
Yeah, but so we're gonna hear from Carey Lawrence later on kind of fearless leadership and taking risks and making mistakes. And I think the spirit of that in this community is great. We love innovating, we love driving transformation. I think one of the things that we've learned, and by the way, I think Arrow is kind of have deep expertise in this, is there is a process. And understanding what customers really want and being able to articulate that clearly, articulate the value proposition, understanding what we have in our inventory to support that and putting those together, and then having SI, VAR capability at the edge, making sure that fits. Again, it sounds really easy, it sounds simple, and you're probably saying, Rod, I'm not going to give you an MBA for that, right? That's so obvious. We just don't do it very well. We miss a process step, or we get into these excitable discussions around what's possible, and we all high-five each other, and we walk out with non-executable plans, and we feel good about ourselves. So I think the trick is there. So I think if you're an SI or VAR partner, however you define that kind of role at the edge, understand what's available and what you can deliver to your end user, and that's massive value, and that's a gap that I think we're getting proficient at. But I'll give us an industry a C at that at the moment, and if we're going to get to where we want to be, we need to move that up to an A. So I think putting those two things together is key, and I think you'll see some very thought-provoking examples today of solution capability, which is kind of very, very deployable, but needs some art at the edge to drive that value to your end user customers. So there's an opportunity for us all here.
And if I can add one more thing. You guys are probably going to have some thoughts relative to customers that you guys have. I had a couple of conversations last night around some potential opportunities, and the question was, how do we engage? And I don't know if Sammy's in the room, but Sammy Tero basically leads the IoT practice for the SI and VAR channel for us. So please reach out to him. He's your main interface. His team, Nick Sanchez, is also in the room. Make sure you take a minute to meet up with him, and he's the one. Thank you, Nick. Make sure that you guys get to know them, and they're your main interface because they know how to go navigate all the other suppliers, technology, people, capabilities we have within Arrow, and they'll help hurdle, kind of bridge that gap for you and bring the right resources to kind of help you close the deal.
Also, I'll do a shameless plug here.
All right.
Microsoft is doing a series of events called IoT in Action, which last year we did 5. This year we have 10 that we're doing in multiple cities around the world. We also have a web series, and both of our partners that are next to me are highly involved in that series as well, in terms of Arrow providing that solution aggregator capability, and then of course our partnership with Intel. So I would be happy to talk to anybody about it, or just go look IoT in Action, and those are great events to not only see what the current thinking is around IoT, but also we've got a lot of opportunities to meet other partners that are doing interesting things and matchmaking with partners that you can plug into if you have part of a solution that comprises an IoT solution.
All right. One last quick question.
So just while we're going to the mic, there's a bunch of Intel people here today as well. You are going to hear from Willie Chow and Ted Demiris on solution strategy. Having those two together in the same place at the same time is amazing, by the way, so you're very lucky. And if you're sitting next to somebody you don't know and they look smart, they might work for Intel, so reach out and have a conversation.
That was more shameless than my part.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
ahead.
may have one question. One thing that came up is the proof of concept, the exploration. And we often deal with companies and value-added resellers who have a challenge. They know how to do business one way. They're not multidisciplinary. They don't understand the building blocks of the entire ecosystem to bring a solution to market. And what I find very interesting is that although we understand that there is a strong desire, and you repeated this many times, and I love it, the repeat and deploy. And I think it is exactly what we need to do in order to make it sustainable and to find a sustainable business model that everybody can buy into. The question I have for you is that, considering that we're dealing with different organizations with different skill sets, with the complexity of building solutions from the hardware to the security to the cloud to integrating it within the business context and putting I would say the complexity at the edge. So you're here to help provide the technology, facilitate the journey. Yet there's this dismissal around the POCs, and most companies like IBM will promote a lot of the ideation sessions, the crawl, walk, and run approach, which very often takes too long and makes it difficult for people to understand the return and makes it easy to shut down a project that may be reaching some level of maturity or could reach a level of maturity, and it doesn't because of transformation management issues. So I get a sense, and I'm sorry, I'm French, so things take longer for French people.
So much for the quick question.
So,
but
but
keep going.
I'm asking you for the British colleague over here. So anyway, so the bottom line is this. You dismissed it in a way to favor a much more industrious approach, and yet I still see out there in the field that there's a discomfort around jumping in, and there is a lack of understanding of the multidisciplinary. So do you have the intention in your journey, in your offer, to give a clear vision of the building blocks of what it takes so that the participants know exactly where to reach out to build a solution?
Yeah.
The enablement here. is what I
Yeah,
care
so I think the reason we're making fun of science projects and POCs is because we've gone through the school of hard knocks relative to those. I think our intention there is not to say no, but make sure that there is business buy-in at the highest level when you go into these proofs of concepts, that there is, a journey that's well defined from the proof of concept to the pilot to production. Otherwise, what we've found over the last couple of years is a lot of, hey, can you do a free POC for me? And we spend a lot of time, you spend a lot of time, and ultimately there is no benefit. There's no business benefit for anybody. And so I think that's really the lesson learned. There is always work required, but I think if you go the path of the free POC, I think people are setting themselves up for failure because there is no business buy-in.
Yeah, so a couple of comments. So first of all, congratulations to France on winning the World Cup. I'm from England, and the last time we won it was before Intel was invented. So that was 1966. By the way, the joke in England is when we started building the Channel Tunnel between England and France, we'd both start building the tunnel, and the middles wouldn't meet. So we have a fantastic relationship with the French in the UK. Going back to the kind of boardroom discussion around there's $1 trillion opportunity, but we're not seeing it. I think there's frustration that we haven't been disciplined enough around really being honest around outcomes that are possible and deployable now. So I just think that's the essence of what we're trying to do. I absolutely don't think we're trying to slow down innovation. In 2017, Intel spent $13 billion in R&D. Innovation continues, but we have to just be very purposeful in understanding where that innovation is needed. And there's enough requirement around business model innovation, infrastructure innovation, regulation innovation. There's lots of places where that innovation is needed. I just don't want us to keep doing it again and again and again in the same place and getting the same outcome. One of my kind of great kind of coaches in Intel in previous years was a chap called Kirk Skaugen, who's now running Lenovo, and one of his comments was always, sometimes you just have to slow down to speed up. And I think having that discipline to take the time to understand how we can join this to deployment is purposeful and meaningful and shouldn't detract from innovation, but should enable innovation in the places where it's needed. Again, very easy to say, and I can say, go buy the winning lottery ticket tonight. That's a great strategy. It's very hard to do. So I do understand this isn't simple, but if we can move away from the whiteboard innovation in the boardroom and the people feeling good, and the CEO of a company saying, Rod, I want an IoT project. I don't care what it is. I just want an IoT project I can announce to my shareholders. If we can move away from that to meaningful, tangible outcomes, as an industry, we're in much better shape and we're delivering more value.
I also believe that there's an essence of scalability in the POCs. So we're kind of saying, hey, don't do POCs, but a lot of POCs have evolved into something that can then be made into a repeatable solution, or is a repeatable solution. Rod, you mentioned that you have more than 100. Microsoft is in those same type of digits in terms of the repeatable solution. So there's a potential for every POC to become a block of IP that then gets resold and repeatable. It's just, I think your point, Ashish, was stay away from the ones that truly are, science experiments, and think about, could this evolve into something that could be replicated over and over and over again? And we're very happy to invest in that type of solution. Excellent.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much to this audience for hanging in it. We went over a couple minutes, but I think the sessions are going to start next, and so enjoy them, and we'll see you around throughout the day today. Thank you.